Hey everyone, we are going to cover two things in this next video, and both of them are very useful, and I like working with them when I get a chance to. And those two things are variable length arguments, and the other are array lists. And both of them are going to help us in certain scenarios. For example, variable length arguments. We've talked about overloaded methods and why we might use an overloaded method. For example, we could have some method called sum where we accept an integer n1 and integer num2, and then we return num1 plus num2. But then if we want to add three numbers together, we'd say int num1, int num2, int num3. And then, but what if we wanted to add four numbers together? Then, in which case we would need to write another overloaded method called sum. So here, you know, these would be two overloaded methods, but then we could have a third and a fourth and a fifth, and you never quite know sometimes how many values could be passed into a method. And so you could just keep on overloading and overloading and overloading methods with the same name and different parameter lists, or you could write a variable length method, in which case you could accept any number of values. And so if we're continuing on that idea of sum, right, where we just add numbers together, but we don't know how many numbers, I'm going to go ahead and write a static method. It's going to return the sum, so it's going to return an integer, and I'm just going to call it sum. And I'm going to say int with three dots after it, and so we're going to accept any number of integers. We're going to call them numbers, right? So this is saying, hey, you have to return an int of some sort. So I'll go ahead and make an accumulator, and then I'll say for int x in numbers, go ahead and add all the values in this numbers array and add it into your total, and we'll return total. And so now this sum can accept any number of ints. If I say 1, 2, and 3, excuse me, I need to call sum 1, 2, and 3. There we go. So this calls the variable length method called sum. Okay, and so you can see we're calling sum, we're passing it 1, 2, and 3, so you add those numbers together, you get 6. So we output 6. Let's go ahead and call this method again. I'll just add a bunch of twos together, get the output of 16. We'll see what happens if we just put a 2.2 just to try this. You can see it's only going to accept integers, so that there's no overloaded method that takes that, so this does not work. Also, if we wanted to have an integer array called my numbers equals and we wanted to pass that into sum numbers, let's try that again, my numbers, copy that, paste it into there. You can see that that also works. So you could pass actual integers, or you can pass an array, and if we add those together, what is that, 5, 11, 19, get the output of 19 there. So that's a really useful tool, so you don't have to continually overload methods for all the different combinations. If you accept one data type, then you can do something like this. Now, next concept is a very useful thing, and the thing about arrays is they've been around a long time, and so they have their downfalls, which we talked about in previous videos, where if you redimension an array size, or if you redimension the number of elements in the array, then you have the potential for losing the values of the elements that are currently stored in the array. So that's kind of a problem, and we showed you how to go around that. But another solution is kind of the next evolution of array is the array lists. And this is an object. This is a class, so we can import the array list class, and that's the first thing. If you're going to work with an array list, it's the first thing you'll have to do. Import Java. It's in the util namespace called ArrayList, so that we can work with an array list. Now let's go ahead and declare our array list. And this looks very similar to a normal object, except for uses what's called a generic, which is this portion right here. This is going to say it's basically our data type. Now, naturally array lists don't have, they're not strongly typed, right? So, which means they can store, if you have an array list called something, and you don't give it a type here in the angle brackets, it's loosely typed, so you could hold whatever you want. You could hold any data type. So the way to make it so that it can only store one type of data is like so. And we'll just call this student names equals. So now that it's basically cast or converted into only storing strings, new array list, and the constructor call there. So now we have this array list called student names, and we call methods. So if we want to add something we want to add data into the array list, we'll say something like student names sub add. Since I looked up and I saw Eric, we're adding Eric to our array list. And so now at position 0, we have a piece of data, Eric. So let's go ahead and add a few more students. Just for the example. Now if we want to print those out, we can use a for loop, and we can say student names dot size, and size is a method that's going to say, well, as you can see, the number of elements in this list. So it returns the number of elements. And to retrieve a value is get, and you can see the get returns an element at the specified position in the list. So let's go ahead and get and use the index as our position in the list. So here's our first list. It's an array list. We're adding 3 student names, and then we're printing them out. Eric, Bob, and Bill. We can also use the toString method. If we were to simply do a, let's comment this out. Well, let's just do a system out println student names toString. you could see it prints out the information in this format here. So it prints out all the elements in the array, just add some brackets and some commas. So this is the toString method of an array list. You could see if you take off the toString call, print out the same thing. So there's an implicit toString call if you don't include that. And again, but the nice thing is that we can dynamically grow our lists in size. So if we want to add elements, or maybe we want to insert a student at a certain spot, we use let's say student names dot add, and we can use an overloaded method of this. And if we hover over, it says inserts the specified element at the specified position in the list. So again, let's call this overloaded version of the add method. Let's try and get that to pull back up. Not that it's necessary. But you can see it takes the index first and then the string. So let's add it at position 1. So Eric will be 0, then this person will be 1. Let's go ahead and add Jane at position 1, then Bob, then Bill. So you can see Eric, Jane, Bob, and Bill. If you want to add a string at a specified element, adds a value at a unspecified position. Another method that you can use as part of the ArrayList class is the remove. So if we see here, Eric is 0, Jane is 1, Bob 2, and Bill is 3. So if I wanted to remove a certain position, we could say student names dot remove, and we'll go ahead and remove position 2, which would be Bob. So if we rerun our program here, we can see that Bob has been removed with the remove method. And finally is replace. And the way to replace, so this will remove an element. And now we're going to replace an item. And to replace, we're going to use the set method, student names dot set, and we're going to replace position 0 with Chris. So you can see that Eric is currently at position 0, and we're going to replace him with Chris. So that is replacing. The last bit of theory that needs to be discussed with an array list: when you use the noarg constructor of an array list, the default capacity is 10, meaning this array list holds 10 strings, but it can dynamically grow. So if you add 11 names, it'll automatically increase to 11. So again, there's always a default capacity if you use this noarg constructor. The way to change that is by passing an integer inside of here. So if we wanted 30 names, now this array list can hold 30 names by default instead of just 10. And so that is the variable length arguments and array lists basics of array lists.